If you just want to jump straight into a fight, Fight Now is back, but this time around it offers a whole new suite of authentic MMA UFC match types, from the fan favorites including Kumite and Backyard to main event, championship and main card fights. But things are a little different this time around. Main card fights are 3 rounds, main event fights are 5 rounds, and so are the championship fights, but they are of course for world titles. But whether you decide to fight online or off, if you go to the Backyard, you'll have to fight 5 3-minute rounds this time around.
UFC 5, for example, a guillotine. You'll have 2 choices. You can choose to force your opponent to submit by crossing both feet behind their back and squeezing, leading to a tap, or you can choose to advance to the mount, a more advantageous position. And although you gave up the submission, you secured another favorable position. As the attacker, the direction of your inputs will always remain the same regardless of the submission. Up to submit, and down to advance to another dominant position. As the player who's defending, the directions of your input will also always remain the same, regardless of the submission. Left to escape, and also right to escape. Well, rest assured, the team accounted for this concern because in tandem with the regular HUD displaying head, body, and leg health, an additional gauge now shows your submission health. Depending on the strength of the submission, your athlete's submission defense stats, as well as your current stamina level, it might require as many as 3 submission attempts to completely deplete your submission health. And when that happens, the submission is instantaneous. It is important to note that despite this protective measure, one-shot submissions remain plausible in UFC 5. These occurrences are exceptional and typically happens when a player has severely mismanaged your stamina, granting the attacker a substantial stamina advantage upon initiating the submission. Contextual submissions have also been expanded in UFC 5. If you find yourself in side control and you try to escape to half guard by framing and bridging up, be careful because your opponent could very well counter that with an arm triangle. If you find yourself entangled in a rubber guard and you try to recover the full guard, also be careful because you could find yourself fighting off an armbar. UFC 5 introduces a multitude of contextual submissions that, once mastered, imbue the ground game with a heightened sense of authenticity. Adding to the authenticity of the ground game, the ground and pound system has also been revamped. All new ground and pound animations, from straight punches to hooks, including high impact elbows to the head and body, accurately captures the visceral reality of ground and pound. And unlike past iterations of the game, when you stop the opponent on the ground, the reaction they give you is believable.
Pretty much a whole round on the ground. Your stamina, like your permanent stamina consumption, should be similar to if you have a whole round striking. The ground won't be like a refuge of almost no stamina cost anymore. With the new submission systems, seamless submissions, we added a lot of depth, but we didn't want it to be intimidating for new players or players who are starting to grapple. You can play grapple assist within submissions. It all flows, like for a casual player, like it's pick up and play. You're not going to play at a high level, but you're not going to get stuck. Now there's no more meaning game, and when you're using grapple assist just continues to work as you get into the actual submission. You can use the submission intent to just keep going and finish the opponent. If you're defending, just trying to get up, you can keep just doing that. Or if you're trying to ground and pound, you can escape a submission right into a ground and pound position to punish your opponent for doing it. Do you try to submit you? You can even, as a defender, use the submission intent to counter a submission to one of your own if your fighter can do that. A lot of the fanciest things in this system actually happens a lot. You get to see a lot of cool animations because you're often sort of, especially if you have 2 beginners playing grapple assist, you're constantly racing. And when you're racing, like, you know that's when you see the coolest stuff, right? We get into an armbar, like immediately, you try to escape, I try to finish, we go into a belly down armbar, you flip, and then end up inside your leg. All of these crazy stuff, the coolest stuff, actually happens a lot when you're playing as a beginner. In your own pace, you can start to explore depth and changing controls and so on and so forth. And there are more changes to the ground. So it was almost impossible to get to back mount and back flat positions, because when you're doing it, the people could just roll for free and end up back sitting, which is a little less dominant for you. They cannot do that for free anymore. If they have a stamina advantage, they can do that, just like in UFC 4. If they don't, they can. So now there is a new contextual transition there for when you're trying to get back mount and they're trying to roll. It's a brand new result. I won't say what it is, but it's not back sitting. Now it should be much more viable to get to the actual back mount and back flat and use the submissions from there, which are supposed to be very juicy.
Even further, there are now different play styles to choose from as well.
So what we've added are multiple game styles. There's the stand and bang game style, which will turn off all grappling. There's the simulation game style, which will be as real as it gets. So essentially turning off the HUDs, increasing damage, increasing stamina drain, making it as simulation as we can possibly get UFC 5. What knockout game style does is it turns off health recovery. So when you do get hit, that health is gone, and when it gets to 0, there will be a knockout. You'll be able to apply that to Fight Now, you can apply that to career mode. You can search for online matches in simulation game styles as well. Along with those 5 categories of game styles that we have, we've allowed you to make your custom game styles as well. So you'll be able to turn off doctor stoppages, you'll be able to turn down the damage. You can apply that to any mode as well and play UFC 5 the way you want to play.
From the new awesome simulation style that uses real-time rounds and increased damage and stamina drain to emulate an authentic fight experience, to knockout that turns off health regeneration and recovery and applies unlimited stamina and combinations. With the unified rules of MMA, or something completely different with these new game modes and custom rule sets. All these new modes are also going to really change the way you're going to have to play and compete inside the cage. And the fact you can fight online and master whatever game mode you enjoy the most really lets you play UFC 5 however you want.
My most favorite feature this year is our fighter select. And one of the most special things about booting up any fighter game is looking at our fighter select and looking at the fidelity of our fighters, how our Frostbite engine has considerably improved our fighter select this year.
And of course, ranked online mode is back for the more competitive players. Pick your favorite UFC athlete, go head to head with other players online and compete for spots in global and friends ranked leaderboards. Wins and losses are added up and rank you in a division as you try and make your way up to compete against the best players in the world and compete for online world titles. Ranked is once again separated into 20 divisions, and there are challenges to complete for reaching the top, as well as collecting rubies with your title defenses. UFC 5 is the next step in mixed martial arts gaming, and with it comes changes to the visuals and game mechanics, as well as a whole host of all these new game modes for you to step into the virtual octagon and experience the UFC like you've never done before. Want to have a 25-minute kumite fight where your health does not recover the whole time? You can do it. As well as new features you'll discover in career mode and tons of awesome stuff that's going to change the way you play UFC 5. Let's start with Fight Week. UFC 5 is truly an extension of the UFC fan experience, and there's no better example than with the Fight Week gameplay mode. It's a next level event-driven live service update. In the build-up to the biggest UFC events, you'll be able to take part in a series of all new challenges and features that really connect you to the blockbuster UFC cards and the world of MMA in a way that's never been done before. Let's take a look at everything involved. Going into Fight Week, you will be presented with several Fight Week challenges. These challenges give you different objectives to complete throughout the week and will give you the opportunity to unlock rewards inspired by those events, including new created fighter vanity items, player profile, customization assets, emotes, and even UFC athlete alter egos. There's also a section now to make fight picks before real-world UFC events, so you can make predictions for the main card of every pay-per-view. You'll automatically then be seeded into fight pick leaderboards after making those choices, and after the event is over, depending on how many of them you got right, the top ranking players will earn in-game UFC coins, which could be used to buy more assets for your profile and your UFC athletes. You'll also be presented with Fight Week contracts, which will give you a daily fight offer where you can take on AI opponents under preset gameplay settings. Completing these contracts can earn you in-game currency, and the difficulty of these contracts increases over the course of the week. Your total wins, losses, and finishes are tracked in the contracts tab, and it's another chance to earn yourself some in-game rewards. This year, it's all about bringing the real world of MMA and the virtual octagon closer together.
Our users are playing career mode. We know how many players are playing career mode. It's a very popular mode on UFC 4. A lot of people play career mode multiple times. And one of the pain points that we saw was training camp, obviously. It takes a long time. Training camp in real life, it's not fun. What we've allowed you to do in UFC 5 is, one, you can simulate your entire training camp and get to peak fitness. So once you've completed a challenge pack in sparring, you can then simulate to that grade over and over again if you get that same challenge pack again. There's a lot of simulation everywhere across career mode just to get you to the fight faster. We've done a lot with our AI tuning this year in career mode specifically. Of course, sparring is hard, right? We do like there to be a little bit of a danger to sparring. There's always a chance of getting knocked out getting hurt. There's always a chance of now getting cut as well in career mode, in sparring.
For the first time in franchise history, UFC 5 is powered by the Frostbite engine.
And with the Frostbite engine, UFC 5 looks amazing, man. It really gave me those feelings of stepping into the cage.
That all starts with the foundation of the Real Impact system, authentic damage.
Damage impacts your fighter's attributes during the game. So, if you got a cut bleeding into your eye, it will lower your defensive abilities on that side of the body. And if you take one too many kicks to your lead leg, you'll start to limp, your mobility will decline, and your attack power will drop. Guys, I've taken some calf kicks. They look just as painful in the game as they are in the octagon.
Working hand in glove with authentic damage is the all-new strategic element of doctors' checks and stoppages.
If you take serious damage, the ref might call in the doctor to check on you. Once you're cleared to keep fighting, you're going to have to switch up your strategy to protect that hurt area to keep the fight from getting stopped. And on the other side of this coin, can you make the most of your opponent's injury until the doctor has no choice but to stop the fight? While every fight starts on the feet, it should be just as fun to tangle on the ground. We got a new seamless submission system, and it really legitimizes the ground game in UFC 5.
The seamless submission system removes the minigames completely and functions as an extension of the overall ground game. This delivers a much faster and far more intuitive experience, keeping the action on the ground fresh and fluid.
Which is essentially a catchphrase for the conglomeration of health events, facial injuries, full body hit reactions, overall authentic damage, and the impact they have on a fight. Unlike previous games where injuries to the athletes were mainly superficial, UFC 5 introduces an innovative impact system that accurately reflects the physical toll the athlete undergoes during a match, which influences both the athlete's condition and the ultimate match results. Vision penalty icon appears when an athlete gets cut in areas of the face where bleeding could lead to visual impairment, like the brows, the eye, the forehead, etc. This leads to an increase in the amount of damage you take on the affected side while the penalty is active. If no further impact occurs to the affected location in 30 seconds, the penalty is lifted. The penalty is also lifted at the start of a new round. The breathing penalty icon appears when an athlete sustains an injury to the nose or mouth. This impact will decrease the short-term stamina recovery for as long as the penalty is active. If the athlete can protect against subsequent damage to the affected area, the penalty will be lifted in 30 seconds or at the start of a new round. Icons authentically represents the effect a submission attempt can have on an athlete. The heart icon appears when a player loses a chunk of their maximum stamina due to a deep choke. The goal here is to accurately represent how chokes, especially deep ones, can negatively affect an athlete's overall stamina. The arm health icon is meant to signal a loss in maximum block health due to a deep arm submission. Whether it's an armbar or a kimura, overextending the arm realistically leads to a reduction in blocking ability, and UFC 5 represents this authentically. The leg health icon signals a loss in permanent leg health when a player survives a deep leg lock. Stoppage icon will appear initially as a result of any facial injury, not including injury to the mouth. At first, the icon appears yellow, but as subsequent impact is received on the affected area, the icon will appear more red. The more red the icon becomes, the closer the ref is to halting the match briefly and requesting a doctor check. If the doctor examines the injury and determines it is not severe enough to warrant a stoppage, he will exit the cage and the match will continue. However, if he examines the injury and determines that it is indeed significant enough, he will signal to the ref and the match will end. Defensively sound has never been more important, and because of this, there has been some significant enhancements to the core defensive tools in the game. Footwork, blocking, head movement, and lunges have all received significant upgrades, resulting in a substantial improvement in their reliability for defensive maneuvers. It is faster and it costs less stamina. In addition to that, the vulnerability incurred while using head movement has been reduced. Altogether, These advancements collectively establish head movement as an even more potent defensive tool.
The frames part of it is just the first part, like the first buff, and it was also buffed regarding the stamina cost. It now costs a lot less across the board, and the vulnerability was decreased and the mitigations were increased. We also added mitigation to when you try to dodge sideways against the frontal attack and it still catches you. So if you're trying to dodge a jab but you don't get out of the way in time, it will still grant you a little bit of vulnerability because you're slipping out of the way. So it's like the punch is glancing off very slightly. It was buffed across the board by 1 frame. The low end is not as low as before, so a fighter with a bad head movement stat won't be as slow. And as the fighters get tired throughout the fight, they don't get chunks of slowness added to them. Yeah, but overall, the timing of it is slightly faster and varies more granular.
Uses brand new animations for punches, kicks, elbows, and knees. To talk about a few, the new leg kick animation is beautiful and the knees are so realistic and powerful looking. The new pivot left hook animation will come in handy when dealing with pressure, and the new front kick to the body animation is snappy and beautiful. But that's not all. With the power of next generation graphics, visual cues, as well as hit reactions showing just how impactful strikes are, have all been amplified. When you throw a strike and it makes impact with the athlete, improved facial deformation sends a ripple through the now maintains a uniformity with the takedown input, which enhances the overall experience. In UFC 5, triggering a clinch is as simple as simultaneously pressing square and X. But that's not all that was done to the clinch.
Yeah, so we did a few things. The main thing is that it is easier to prevent people from clinching you by striking them. Because one frustrating thing is that, okay, you're gonna clinch me, I'm just gonna punch out of it. But in UFC 4, almost always you would punch them and they will clinch you through it as an exchange. Exchanges into the clinch can still happen, but if you're punching someone with a straight attack, we figured out it would make sense that that should be the thing that would kind of push their face away, not let them clinch you. So any jab with straight will nullify a clinch attempt. Now, furthermore, any retreating attack, like any sort of retreating attack, makes the clinch not stick to you. You're moving away, right? So they can't clinch you if you're using a retreat attack. And we made more subtle changes to the flow of when you're striking someone as you're trying to escape the clinch. For a specific window, they can't block when they're actually exiting, right? That is still possible, but it is harder to do now, and it is especially harder from the cage single under position. But the defensive striking the clinch is generally more powerful than